Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Hager number WTBB1168 5x6 wide throw hinge. This is shown in the US 10B oil rubbed bronze finish. This is one heck of a hinge. Well, why? It's big, it's heavy, it's large, it's capable of handling lots of weight. That's why. Let's go over the part number. WT, first of all, means that it is a wide throw hinge, which means that it is wider than it is tall, and we'll go over the size in a moment. The BB stands for ball bearing. On this hinge, there are 4 bearing packets, as you can see. The 1168 conspires to mean a number of things. First of all, it means that it's made of steel. It means that it is a 5-knuckle hinge, and on a 5-knuckle hinge like this, it is also inferred that it is a full mortise hinge. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaves there, right where the hinge is bent, where my little finger is, that when they're brought parallel, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and the frame and maintain that margin between the door and frame. This is also inferred in the part number as a heavyweight hinge. This hinge is 190 thousandths of an inch thick, and when you have a heavyweight hinge, you'll have 4 bearing packets rather than 2 bearing packets like you'd have on a standard weight hinge. We'll talk more about that in a moment. This is a 5x6. That means that the hinge is 5 inch tall and that it is 6 inch wide. Okay. The height is the first dimension in a hinge like this. So when it's 5x6, it's 5 inch tall. Doesn't really so much matter, I suppose, if you have a square hinge, but when you have anything rectangular like 5x6, or maybe 4.5x8, or maybe 5x4.5, or 4.5x4, it's important to know what dimension goes first, because you can make an unintentional mistake, meaning if you had hollow metal doors that you were ordering for 5x4.5 inch hinges, it'd be very important to know that you're prepping the doors and frames for 5 inch tall hinges rather than 4.5 inch tall. More commonly, you would probably encounter a 4.5x4 inch hinge in an aluminum storefront door. That's not uncommon. It's actually quite common to have a 4.5 tall by 4 inch wide hinge. So if you were ordering one hinge to replace like maybe a fatigued top hinge in an installation, it's really important to know that it's 4.5x4, because if you ordered the wrong size, it will not work in the prep and will not be compatible with the other hinges when it comes to the vertical axis of pivoting. Okay. Obviously, this hinge is going to be available in lots of different size combinations. 4 by 5, 6, 7, 4.5 by 5, 6, 7, 5 by 6, 7, and 8. I'm sure you can get a 5x8 hinge. There is some information below this video in the extended description that I'd like to go over next. Okay, now what we're looking at next is going to be full mortise. We discussed that. Steel hinge with a steel pin. We discussed that this is made of steel and that it's 190 thousandths thick. It's heavyweight, meaning there's residential weight, which is about 96 thousandths of an inch thick. There's standard weight, which on a 5 inch hinge would be 145 thousandths of an inch thick. And then there's heavyweight, which would be 190 thousandths thick. So the thickness of the leaf actually changes based on residential or standard or heavy weight hinges. Ball bearing, indeed. Heavy weights are always going to have 4 bearing packets. 5 knuckle. A button tip is what this has. If you use your imagination, it looks like a button on a coat. You can do decorative tips on such a hinge, and it wouldn't be uncommon as well to do a ball tip, which is the most common of all of the decorative tips that you'll see on a hinge. And the reason that's the case is because you're going to end up seeing a hinge like this on residential applications. You might have, while it's a wide throw hinge technically, you may not need it to have, you may not need it to be used appropriately on a wide throw sort of application. You might just have a really thick door. Maybe your door is 2 3/4 thick, something in that range. That might make a very appropriate sort of scenario for such a hinge. Something very heavy, very large, and very thick. You could see a 5x6 heavyweight like this. You might also just have an 1.75" thick door, and you need a heavyweight, you need a wide throw hinge, and you want it to be a heavyweight gauge as well. Okay. Now, back to the decorative tips. Ball tip, the most common of the decorative tips, but you can also do, in addition to button and ball, you can do urn tip, steeple tip, acorn tip can be done as well, all decorative options. We could even do radiused corners on such a hinge, which would be very unusual, but we could certainly do that as well. There are 8 holes in this hinge total, and screws are included in a complementary finish. Now, there is a link below this video to a document called Template, where you can review the dimensional properties of the location of the screw holes for this hinge, and it's important that you review that if you are replacing existing. You're going to want to be absolutely sure that you know ahead of time before you order a custom-made, one-off, non-returnable piece of hardware like this. You're going to want to take note of where those screw holes are in an existing replacement sort of scenario, so that you're not in receipt of the hinge and realizing, oh, these holes are in the wrong location. Because over the decades, there have been different templates of where holes can be located. So review that information first. That template will also be handy because it will tell you what is called the F dimension, which is what I had kind of shown you a little bit earlier. The dimension from where the swag is, the bend in the hinge leaf, out to the edge. And it will tell you what that is for a variety of different sizes. And those hinge locations are referenced off the bottom of the template leaf as well, being shown actually just like this is how it's shown. It's a heavyweight hinge, weighs over 2 pounds as a matter of fact. The template also refers to a variety of different part numbers that are just different types of hinges that are different in their thickness, their quantity of knuckles, their base material, and their bearing construction. With or without bearings, bearing exposed or concealed bearing packets are there as well. Okay, so that template is there for your review so that you can be sure to eliminate any potential guesswork involved. There's also a variety of options when it comes to security on such a hinge. This is a standard removable pin hinge, and wouldn't be an issue for an in-swinging door naturally, or an issue where you were not concerned whether or not the pin could be driven out of this hinge, and it could be. By getting something in there and tapping on it, you'll drive that pin out. Speaking of that, you could also remove this bottom button tip. If you had a pair of doors and you wanted the hole to be on the bottom of both sides, you're going to probably have to reverse those, and you can do that. You can tap the pin out, get something down in there, and gently tap this button out. You don't want to put a wrench on it or you'll mark it, that's for sure. And you can reverse that. That's certainly not a problem whatsoever. Security options: if you have a door that swings out, you can do a removable pin option, making it, when you add a set screw to it, making it into a non-removable pin, where they'll be drilled and tapped a hole into the barrel, and then into the pin there's a groove cut, so that when the set screw is tightened, that groove, the set screw, will fit into the groove of the pin, preventing you from driving it out, making it all but impossible to do so. There's other options in terms of security on a hinge. You can do a security stud, which would be a round piece of steel actually attached to the hinge leaf, and then a hole over on this side, so that when the door is closed, it would really make that all but impossible to tip that door out by driving the pin, because there's that piece of steel that's sitting into that hole that's there. Okay. And again, for an outswing sort of door. Now, where would you use such a hinge, a 5x6? Well, if you had an exceptionally thick door, you could see a 5x6 sort of hinge. A 2 3/4 thick door might be appropriate. Or you might just have, like I said earlier, an 1 3/4 thick door where you needed a wide throw circumstance. The 5 inch is not a problem when it comes to the height of the hinge leaf on an 1 3/4 thick door. But what you're doing compared to a standard 4.5 inch hinge, you're really moving that vertical axis of pivoting significantly further out. Okay, now why would you need to do that? Well, a variety of reasons. You might have, and probably the most common, A door that swings out, but you've got some treatment on the exterior part of the wall, like exceptionally thick brick molding, or maybe shutters that have been applied, or some treatment, maybe a stucco treatment to the face of the wall, or a drive-it, where you want the door to be able to open, but to be able to open up further past 90 degree would be a circumstance where you'd want to move that vertical axis of pivoting out further so that when the door opens up, it can get out and around whatever the thicker area of wall treatment is. Again, a shutter or something applied to it. You could also have a circumstance where something's been done to the otherwise standard installation of the frame. Maybe you've got some drywall that's been brought back against the face of the wall and then returned back to the face of the frame. That might be a circumstance where you need to move the vertical axis of pivoting out further. You could also have a circumstance where the inset of the door is deeper into the frame than standard. When you are on the pull side of the door, if you were to run your hand over the face of the door and frame, you would notice the door is generally pushed in a little bit, about 3/32 of an inch. Not always. It can be flush. It can be. But it's generally inset. Well, what if you took that 3/32 of an inch and you made it 1 inch? Or if you made it 9 inch? Whatever the case is, the principle's the same. If you need to be able to have a door work where the door is centered inside the frame itself and not almost flush, you need to have a longer, or I should say a wider hinge. There are scenarios where I have seen the Capitol building, the original Capitol building in the state of Iowa, is in Iowa City. And that's a 2-story building, or maybe a 3-story building. I forget how many floors, probably maybe 3, with the cupola up at the top. Exceptionally thick walls, because this building was built in, forgive me the state of Iowa, but 1840 maybe. So the walls on the first floor are exceptionally thick, so they can support everything up above. And what you've got there is 16-inch deep, thick walls, solid wood frames. The doors are actually set in the center of these openings. So they're about in the 8-inch. And yes, indeed, they have wide throw hinges that are likely 20-inch wide. They might be 6 or 8 tall, but then indeed 20-inch wide. And it's because of that significant inset. So you'll see that. Now, it's obviously very uncommon to build anything like that today, but you can take the same sort of principle and apply it to something that you might run into where you need a wide throw hinge. Let's say you have south side of Chicago is a town called Beverly. Lots of old, historic, gorgeous mansion-type homes. You could have a 12-foot wide opening. You could have 4 3-foot doors. The 2 inner doors, the 2 outer doors. The 2 inner doors are hinged to the 2 outer doors. The owner wants to take those 2 inner doors, fold them back against the outer doors, and then take those outer door assemblies and fold them back so that you can get a 12-foot wide opening. So at Thanksgiving time, you've got the entire separation between what is the gigantic dining room and the gigantic sitting room. So they want to join everything. That's not uncommon to see that sort of scenario. And indeed, the client who's getting this hinge has a similar scenario to that. While it's not an interior application, it is a shed where they have 6 doors, and they're going to take those 2 the pair of doors that are innermost, fold them, then take those doors and fold those out so he can get access to his entire 17-foot wide opening or something like that. Now, also, I've seen that same scenario in a case where there was a loading dock door in a business in Central Park South in New York City. Space is at an ultra premium there. Couldn't swing doors out in the traditional fashion. It's business, sidewalk, street. That's it. Can't swing doors out. Whoever the ingenious person was, had the thought to maximize the usable space, but not violate code, and certainly not get himself into a scenario where the doors were unworkable. I bet it was an 8-foot wide opening. Could not have a pair of 4-foot doors. No way. This person had 4 2-foot doors and then stacked them. This one folded here, folded against the wall. And as I studied the hinge, indeed, each of them, while the leading edge door and the second door, those were standard hinges. But then you got into wide throw on the second set, on the third set, and then on the door where it was hinged to the frame. It was an ingenious use of wide throw hinges. It was not an emergency egress, a path of emergency egress. It was for loading dock situation only. And there was a man door, emergency egress man door next to it, but they need to be able to bring a fork truck in with an 8-foot wide or whatever it was, skid. So it was just a tremendous use of wide throw hinges. In a scenario like that, you're certainly going to see a condition where you're going to be using thicker hinges. Imagine that fourth panel on the jamb and the weight of all of those doors. You're carrying the weight of an 8-foot wide door, you know, on these hinges, and there were 4 or 5 of them installed on like an 8-foot opening. So, you know, ingenious ways to use it. So really all you're doing is moving the vertical axis of pivoting out, and what sort of clearance you're going to need from the face of this door to the face of whatever you need to clear. Okay, so where is this point? Where is the door going to become when you do this, basically? You know, where is it going to occupy, and how much room here do you have to have for clearance? That dimension is directly related to the vertical axis of pivoting. Okay, great quality hinge. So those are lots of scenarios where you can see wide throw hinges. Now you can also buy this hinge in, as I kind of touched on earlier, a variety of different base materials: steel, stainless, brass or bronze, finishes, sizes, gauges, the whole 9 yards. The name Hager, their namesake is Hager Hinge. They can do everything with a hinge. There's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Hager products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, along with a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on the Hager, their part number WTBB1168, 5x6 and an oil rub bronze finish, wide throw hinge, or any other Hager product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.